Oh my.
Okay, good evening, everyone. This regular council meeting is called to order at 5:01 on December 13th. Council would like to acknowledge the Yukluthot on whose traditional territories the District of Ucluelet operates. Audience members, delegates, and public hearing participants are advised that this proceeding is being video recorded and broadcast on YouTube and Zoom, which may store data on foreign servers. Does everyone have the late agenda? Yes. May I have a motion to amend the agenda to add the late item, updated letter of intent as Appendix B, to the report agenda item 8.2, zoning amendment to 2108 Peninsula?
I'll move that.
Councillor Hoare, Councillor Mafty. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? None opposed, and that carries. May I have a motion to adopt the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Councillor Anderson,
I'll second.
Councillor Hoare. Any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed, and that carries. There are 6 sets of minutes for adoption. The first is from a special council meeting minutes from the December 9th, 2021. Are there any errors or omissions? May I have a motion to adopt the minutes as presented?
I'll move adoption.
Councillor Hoare. Councillor Mafty. All in favor? None opposed, and that carries. The next minutes are from the August 10th, 2021 Committee of the Whole. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, may I have a motion to adopt the minutes as presented?
Move adoption.
Councillor Hoare.
Second.
Councillor Kennington. Any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed, and that carries. The third minutes are from the October 19th, 2021 Committee of the Whole. Are there any errors or omissions?
Yes.
Councillor Hoare.
On page 23, I guess, of the agenda, page 3 of the minutes, Heather Riddick's name is incorrectly spelt. It's Riddick in a couple of places. And there's also a typo on the next page under the Whale Festival Society. This is one of those ones where the homonyms and synonyms and things. So it's there, T-H-E-I-R, not T-H-E-R-E in the last line of her report.
Thank you. Any other errors or omissions? Hearing none, may I have a motion to adopt the minutes as amended?
So moved.
Councillor Hoare. Councillor Mafty. Any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed, and that carries. The next minutes are from the November 23rd, 2021 Committee of the Whole. We're definitely getting caught up on minutes here. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, may I have a motion to adopt the minutes as presented?
So moved.
Councillor Anderson. Councillor Mafty. Any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed, and that carries. Item 4.5 is the June 21st, 2022 Committee of the Whole minutes. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, may I have a motion to adopt the minutes as presented?
So moved.
Councillor Kennington.
I'll second.
Councillor Anderson. Any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed, and that carries. The final minutes are from the November 29th, 2022 regular council meeting. Are there any errors or omissions? Hearing none, may I have a motion to adopt the minutes as presented?
Move adoption.
Councillor Hoare.
Second.
Councillor Kennington. Any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed, and that motion carries. We have one delegate today who will be presenting remotely. Mr. Rotenberg is the Connective Support Society delegate online.
Yes, I believe Mr. Horn has been waiting patiently. Mr. Horn, at this point, you've been made
co-host, which means that you can share your screen.
Thank you very much.
Welcome, Mr. Horn.
Okay, very good. So we can start then, can we?
Yes, please do.
And we'll be sharing our PowerPoint screen with you. Is that how you'd like to do that?
Yes, I think that's the best approach.
All right, I'll start by saying thank you for having us. My name is John Horn. I'm the Executive Director of the Connect Support Society here in Nanaimo, and I have two of my staff with me here today.
Teresa McDonald, a rent bank case manager.
And my name is Azura, and I'm a rent bank case manager as well.
Thanks. So we're just come here to talk a little bit about our rent bank function, and I'm going to bring up our PowerPoint slide there for us to do that. And I just have to find the share screen button, which is somewhere down here. There. Okay, and where's our PowerPoint?
Press and then go.
There we go. Now, can you see that?
Yes, we can.
Very good, thank you. So with no further ado, Teresa will start us off.
Hi. So we're here to talk about Rent Bank BC, explain what we do, who we help, the cost of the program, and how you can participate in it. What we do basically is help people with their rent, hence Rent Bank. If there's been sort of an economic crisis in your, say you're waiting for EI to come in, or you've unexpectedly lost your job, or you've been hospitalized and you can't make your rent, we will help people with arrears, a couple of months back in arrears, or their current month rent, or new month and damage deposit, and some help with utilities. If these are interest-free loans, repayable over 24 months, $1,500 maximum to an individual and $1,800 maximum to a family. And if we can't help them, we will steer them to other areas that could be more suitable to their needs.
So BC Rent Bank is a province-wide program funded by the province, partially. So a lot of larger centers do have their own rent bank. Here in Nanaimo, we do have Nanaimo's Rent Bank, which is funded by the City of Nanaimo. And we serve the city here as well as the Regional District of Nanaimo. Currently, Iqaluit is served by the Kamloops Rent Bank, as well as a lot of other smaller areas in the province. So our goal moving forward is to take over all of Vancouver Island, aside from Vancouver and the Comox Valley, to be served by our rent bank here in Nanaimo. Now we want to do that to make it more localized, a lot more accessible, and also so that we can be closer by to connect with community supports and promote the rent bank for local individuals. So currently we're aiming to start serving the Mount Waddington Regional District, the Alberni-Clackett Regional District, and the Strathcona Regional District. Oh, so yeah, our goal is just to connect with other resources in those communities as well, as we are aiming to expand, so that we can have local points of outreach for people to go to get more information or to help with their applications.
Thanks, Azura. And so really why we're here today is talk a bit about the money, the cost of the program right now to serve Nanaimo and the regional district. You can see it there. We have $116,000 in loan capital, and our annual operating costs are about $65,000 a year. That's to cover the staff wages and all the administrative functions of tracking loans, providing the checks, et cetera, et cetera. If we are to expand and provide this service to all the communities on Vancouver Island, except for Victoria, then our costs will raise. So we're looking at an additional $32,000 worth of costs for us to deliver that service locally, and we'll need additional capital. What will happen is if we are given that opportunity by the BC Rent Bank folks with support of the local partners, then we'll raise additional capital, and that'll be made available to residents of these areas, such as Iqaluit and Tofino. Right now, the Kamloops Rent Bank does that work, but they're not publicizing it widely, and they don't have a communication strategy for communities like yours. So we think that if we're given that chance to provide the rent bank service, we'll come into your communities, raise awareness of the opportunity to make an application for a rent bank loan, and work with local nonprofit partners as well to help bring that attention, bring to people's attention the opportunity. So we think it'll require additional capital as well, because we'll actually generate more activity from different jurisdictions such as yours. So really, at the end of the day, the province of British Columbia, along with Vancity Credit Union, they contribute largely to this work, but we all also asking local partners to contribute. City of Nanaimo gives us loan capital dollars and some operating money. So we are going around and we're asking all the jurisdictions that we hope to serve to contribute to this work. Again, the province of British Columbia will be the major contributor, but they are looking to see that we have local partners in place. So essentially, we're here today because we want to tell you about the rent bank, about the function, to support the work being done in your community as well as ours. And we are looking for an annual contribution. The rent bank is an ongoing function, and so we'll be year in and year out that we're providing this service. Each year we go back to the BC Rent Bank folks and propose a budget for the work that we do, and then we get that funded, and then we contribute for another year to the rent bank function. So we're asking for an annual contribution of $10,000 from each jurisdiction, and you know that you're part of a regional district as well, etc. So we anticipate you'll be having discussions with your colleagues about this, but that's the ask we're making of all the communities up and down the Vancouver Island. And our goal really is to expand the rent bank function so that people in your community would know about it, will be able to access it. We know that the cost of rents is going up and that the supply of housing is not adequate to meet that demand. So we anticipate that there'll be a lot of stress on renters over the next several years until such time as hopefully they'll bring supply into place to meet the current demand. So we anticipate that this will be an issue for renters. They're quite vulnerable right now with the rising prices, and not everyone's wages are keeping up with those costs. So we think that this is a service that will be well used by the residents of your jurisdiction, and we hope to be able to save them essentially from experiencing a crisis of homelessness or suddenly having to move, because they can't pay the rent. So it really is the goal to keep people housed and keep them in their place so they don't have that experience of being cast out into the rental wilderness or finding themselves homeless. So that's really the long and short of it. We're happy to take any questions or hear any comments that you might have, and we'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Horn. Any questions from council? I watched your presentation at the ACRD a couple of weeks ago, so it was all new to me then. So I'm sure it's all new to most of us in the room what you do. You had some interesting statistics at that meeting, like success ratios, etc. Maybe you could share some of that with us.
Sure. I'll ask Azura to comment on our repayment rate, which is often a question that people ask. How much money do you get back from these loans? And maybe Azura could comment on that. She does a lot of that management piece. So
currently we've given out about 112 loans to date as of the beginning of last year until now. When Rent Bank BC asks for a repayment rate, now the expectation isn't that everybody's going to be repaying. We would like them to, and that's definitely a piece of it. But if everybody was repaying, then we would be targeting probably the wrong demographic there. So we generally hope for about a 60% repayment rate of expected payments. So if somebody defers, which we are very lenient about, if somebody has something come up and they are on a tight income to expense ratio in their life, we are okay to defer a month and tack it on to the end of a contract. So that doesn't count towards the expected repayment rate. So expected is like how many payments we're expecting from people in that month. So ours looks pretty good. It generally sits at about 70 to 80%. So $10,000, it doesn't help too many households. It could probably help about five or six maybe for that 10,000.
And the applicants can come from anywhere in Vancouver Island or anywhere in the province, and they get directed to a specific rent bank function. So right now, if you applied from Ucluelet, you'd be directed towards the Kamloops office. If you applied from Parksville, you would be directed to us here at Connective Nanaimo. We feel it's important that you have a local service provider in some ways, because some people aren't that computer literate. And we're finding, especially older renters on fixed incomes, they'll often want to come in and seek assistance with filling out forms, etc., or maybe need help to get those bank statements processed or want to bring them in physically, you know. So we will make connections with local agencies. The West Coast Resources Society, we met with them when we were up there last week and forged a connection there. They're happy to be that body for us. If someone in your community wants to make an application but does not have access to a computer, then they will support that person in making the application and facilitate that. So that's the way we mean when we say we want to localize the service. We want to be able to make those connections so even people who don't have access to a computer are able to make an application and provide all the right paperwork, etc.
And we are close enough that we can come out to communities and reconnect with other resources as they come up, as other nonprofits pop up. Kamloops being so far away and having so much on their plate, they're just a bit too swamped to take that on. So it's good to be a little bit more local, and we understand the island because we're here.
Yeah. So we've been in business, by the way, since providing this rent bank function since about 2021, March of 2021. You'll see that we had $115,000 in loan capital. We have not yet fully utilized all that. We have a little bit remaining. So you can see that $100,000 number, that bought us about a year and a half of rent bank function. So it does go quite a way. And as the money trickles back in, we replenish that. But of course, it goes out in big dollops and comes back in little trickles. So it doesn't exactly catch up, but it will eventually over the 2-year time frame. The money is sort of meant to replenish itself. We really look to local municipalities to contribute, and we tend to use their dollars for capital loan purposes. So we kind of load our operating expenses onto the BC Rent Bank, the provincial government. And when we get contributions from the city of Nanaimo, for example, we use that money as loan capital. And that's really going directly into the pockets of citizens who come to us for rent loans. So that's the purpose we would put money, any money that coming from yourselves or other local jurisdictions that we've approached. It generally will go all into loan capital, and that's really the money that we want out to people, etc. So that would be the purpose of this ask as well.
Thank you. And is the vetting process done by you for the people that that apply for this?
No, so when people apply, Teresa or myself collect their information and get their application together, and it gets passed to a loan committee, which is made up of 4 members who are not rent bank case managers. They're separate in their objective. And those people are selected based on a few things. Right now, they're members of Connective as well. And they sit down and they review the applications, and then it's a majority vote if it's a yes or no for the application.
Yeah, we have a housing department that's quite familiar with the cost of rents and people's incomes, etc. They form part of that loan committee and help us assess whether we're likely to get paid back or not, you know, and that's largely the criteria.
Thank you. Any other questions from councillors? No? Okay. Well, thank you for your presentation.
Thanks for having us. We appreciate your time.
All right. Have a great evening.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we will be holding public hearings for District of Ucluelet Zoning Amendment Bylaws number 1319-2022 and 1320-2022. The first public hearing will also be an opportunity for members of the public to comment on Development Variance Permit 22-07. As provided for in the Local Government Act, Council is required to hold a public hearing before adopting a zoning bylaw, an official community plan bylaw, or amendments thereto. This evening there will be 2 individual hearings. At the conclusion of each, the hearing will be closed. Once the public hearing is closed, Council cannot accept further communications or presentations from the applicant or the public respecting the proposed bylaw unless Council decides to hold an additional public hearing. Please note there will be no decisions made during these hearings, and Council is under no obligation to enter into debate on any issue. The purpose is to hear from the public before third reading of each bylaw. Council may consider amending the proposed bylaws based on the public input received at today's public hearings. At a public hearing, all persons who deem their interest in property affected by the proposed bylaw will be given an opportunity to be heard or to present written submissions on matters contained in the bylaw. However, all those who speak at these public hearings must restrict their comments to the subject bylaws and development variance permit, and it is my responsibility to ensure that all remarks are so restricted. You will have 5 minutes to address council for the first time. The Manager of Corporate Services will advise you at 4 minutes and when your time is up. After everyone has spoken once, those wishing to speak again will have an opportunity to do so. After hearing submissions from members of the public, council may ask questions to clarify what has been said. However, this is not a Q&A session or town hall meeting. To maintain an atmosphere that is respectful of all points of view, it is important for the audience to refrain from applauding or cheering for speakers. Today, the applicant and members of the public can participate in person or electronically. Those of you that are here in person, please remain seated until you are invited to speak from the podium. Raise your hand when I call for in-person speakers and approach the podium, which is over there, when you are called on. Please make sure you are speaking into the microphone so people participating electronically can hear you. You must state your name and address clearly. The Manager of Corporate Services will now provide information about participating in this public hearing electronically. Mr. Rotenberg?
The subject bylaws, development variance permit, and related materials are available at my desk right here. They're also available on the District of Ucluelet's website. The public may participate in this hearing in person by calling in using Zoom online or sending an email to communityinput@ucluelet.ca. So that email address is communityinput@ucluelet.ca. For details about how to participate by Zoom, please visit ucluelet.ca.
Thank you, Mr. Rotenberg. I believe Councillor Kennington is going to excuse himself.
I must recuse myself as a consultant with ongoing interest in this project.
I now declare the public hearing for District of Ucluelet Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 1319-2022 open. This proposed bylaw relates to the property at 1693 Larch Road. This public hearing is also an opportunity for the public to comment on Development Variance Permit 22-07. I'd like to invite the Director of Community Planning to provide a brief summary of the proposed bylaw and Development Variance Bylaw. After the Director of Community Planning, the applicant will have an opportunity to present, and then members of the public will have an opportunity to address council. Mr. Gregg.
How's the sound? Is that okay? Thank you. Through the mayor, briefly, in general terms, the purpose of District of Ucluelet Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 1319-2022 is to amend the District of Ucluelet Zoning Bylaw number 1160-2013 to allow a standalone multifamily residential use to occur within the front half of the subject property at 1683 Larch Road, plus multiple family residential and resort condo uses only occurring within the rear half of the subject property. The bylaw would also allow an increase to the maximum floor area ratio from the 0.35 currently allowed in the zoning bylaw to 0.616. This is for a proposed 8-unit condo and townhouse development. And briefly as well, this public hearing also is to take input on the development variance permit. So in general terms, the development variance permit 22-07, which is part of this proposal, would be to vary the zoning bylaw to allow a minimum parking area maneuvering aisle width of 6 meters, whereas section 504.3 subsection 1 of the zoning bylaw 1160 requires a minimum of 7.5 meters. And I'll just add, subject property is on the screen for those who are maybe attending at home. And then there we are. This slide shows the subject property. I would just point out it's highlighted in the air photo on the left with kind of pink corners around the property. And I think I should be able to okay, yes, there is a cursor there if someone's watching. So it's fronting on Larch Road. And just for a couple of landmarks, the blue roof to the north, that would be the ANAF Hall. The Heartwood Kitchen would be just immediately to the east. So that would be Peninsula Road off to sort of the right of that image. And to the south would be the Saki Sushi to provide the food landmarks in the neighborhood there. So the subject property is really this rectangular property where there's an existing building fronting onto Larch Road. And so the front half, that building would be where the multifamily residential uses are being proposed, as shown on the site plan to the right in yellow. And then the new building, which is on the far right of the screen, sorry, is the proposed new building that would be 4 units, which could be either multifamily residential or resort condo under the proposed zoning. And the drive aisle, which I'll highlight if I can get the cursor, there's a bit of a delay here. The drive aisle width is the part that's being proposed to be varied to be the 6.5 meters. Thank you.
Thank you. Does council have any questions for staff? Seeing none, is there any related written correspondence received during the notice period?
Not at this point, but we'll see if anything comes in by way of community input at ucluelet.ca.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rotenberg. This is an opportunity for the applicant or their agent to present. Is the applicant or agent present in person? Great. If you want to take the microphone and just state your name and address for us, please.
Jamie Carson, 780 Rainforest Drive, also owner of Icon Developments and owner of 1683 Larch. Last meeting I was unable to attend due to coaching responsibilities, so I wanted to make myself available tonight if there was any questions.
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Carson? No, I think we're okay. Oh, Councillor Anderson, sorry.
Sorry, through the mayor. Could you point out one more time the garbage pickup? Which side is that on when the garbage gets picked up? Is it in that back corner, or I'm trying to remember?
Yeah, sorry. The garbage pickup isn't finalized at this moment. There has been discussion with the ANAF because I hear now they're putting together a proposal, and so we're going to talk with them about possibly working together with that laneway. As it stands right now, I have a direct access off of Larch straight down. Like if you go where Bruce was showing, as you come down straight down, there's green space to the right of the 4 units. I have that as an option also. So there's still a couple of options.
Any further questions, Councillor Anderson?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, great, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
When we did this, we were in that little office above the district office.
A long time ago. This is the first call for speakers. Are there any members of the public attending in person who wish to speak to this bylaw or development variance permit? Please raise your hand and remain seated until I call on you. Please go to the podium. Thank you.
Maggie Brown. Better? Maggie Brown, 936 Amphitrite Place. So I'm just curious with regard to, are all of the condo units going to be resort, or are they going to be long-term? Or
It's 50-50. So the front building.
Could you go up to the microphone, please?
Okay, we can share a microphone. Sure. I don't have to say my name again, stuff.
No.
Okay, so as Bruce was showing, the front building is an existing residential, and I'll be renovating that into 4 units, creating 4 2-bedroom family homes, which will be residential only.
okay.
The 4 lower units will be designed as residential units with the option to rent nightly if they wish to do so.
Okay, okay.
Win-win.
Right, yeah, so
Yeah.
the building, the existing building, I just want to make sure that I got this straight.
You have to share the microphone, please.
So the existing building is going to be for long-term
Yeah.
rental? Thank you.
Yeah.
That's what I was concerned about.
Yeah, no, it will be.
Perfect, thanks, Jamie.
Yeah.
Thank you. Is anyone else attending in person that would like to speak to this? No. If you're attending online and wish to speak, click the raise your hand icon. The moderator will call on you by your Zoom name. Are there any speakers on Zoom?
No hands are raised at this time.
Thank you. Are there any speakers calling in? Press star 9 if you wish to speak. The moderator will call on speakers by the last 4 digits of their phone number.
No hands are raised at this time.
Have we received any emails to communityinput@ucluelet.ca?
None at this time.
I now invite staff to read any correspondence received before the public hearing which was not published in the agenda.
No such correspondence was received.
Thank you. Does council have any questions for staff? So we have to do this 2 more times. This is the second call for speakers. Are there any members of the public attending in person who wish to speak to this bylaw or development variance permit? Mr. Rotenberg, are there any speakers on Zoom?
No hands raised at this time.
And are there any speakers calling in?
No hands raised at this time.
And have we received any additional emails?
No emails received at this time.
Thank you. And for the third and last time, are there any members of the public attending in person who wish to speak to this bylaw or development variance permit? Mr. Rotenberg, are there any speakers on Zoom?
No hands raised at this time.
And are there any speakers calling in?
Not at this time.
Have we received any additional emails to communityinput@ucluelet.ca?
Just updating the folder. No new emails at this time.
Thank you. I now declare public hearing for District of Ucluelet Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 1319-2022 closed at 5:35 p.m. If someone would like to get Councillor Kennington back.
I'm also going to grab the applicant. Was it heated?
I now declare the public hearing for District of Ucluelet Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 1320-2022 open. This proposed bylaw relates to the property at 327 Pass of Melfort. First, the Director of Community Planning will present a brief overview of the bylaw. After the Director of Community Planning, the applicant will have an opportunity to present, and then members of the public will have an opportunity to address Council. Mr. Gregg.
Thank you. And through the mayor, again, in general terms, the purpose of District of Ucluelet Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 1320-2022 is to amend the District of Ucluelet Zoning Bylaw number 1160-2013 to allow a floor area ratio of 0.51, whereas section R-4.3.2 subsection 1 specifies a maximum floor area ratio of 0.35 for a proposed 31 square meter or 336 square foot addition to the existing house on the property at 327 Passive Melfort Place. And I would just share, and so on the screen for those watching at home or in the audience, the aerial photo is on the left of it here, and on the building elevation on the right, highlighted in red, is the addition that is approximately 12 feet extended off the rear of the existing house. I think it's 12 by 28 feet wide is the proposed addition. And that's it.
Does council have any questions for staff? This is an opportunity for the applicant or their agent to speak. Is the applicant or agent present in person? Awesome. Would you like to speak at the microphone? And just state your name and address, please.
My name is Nicola Buston, and our address is 327 Passive Melfort Place. We applied for this because we built our home in 2019 when we obviously didn't have any children, and now our family has grown and we just need a bigger home, and there obviously isn't many other places in town, and we can't really afford to get a different house, so we came up with this concept, and we have roots in the community. I'm a business owner and my husband fishes out of town, so yeah, we're just hoping to keep our roots in the community and stay here. Thank you.
Thank you. Does council have any questions for the applicant? Congratulations on the new one. This is the first call for members of the public to speak. Are there any members of the public attending in person who wish to speak to this bylaw? Please raise your hand and remain seated until I call. If you're attending online, click the raise your hand icon now if you wish to speak. Mr. Rotenberg, are there any speakers on Zoom?
No hands are raised at this time.
Are there any speakers calling in?
Also, no hands are raised.
And do we have any emails to communityinput@ucluelet.ca?
No emails at this time.
I now invite staff to read any correspondence received before the public hearing which was not published in the agenda.
There is no such correspondence.
Does council have any questions for staff? This is the second call for speakers. Are there any members of the public attending in person who wish to speak to this bylaw? Are there any speakers on Zoom?
No hands raised at this time.
Are there any speakers calling in?
No hands raised.
And have we received any additional emails?
Not at this time.
And this is the third and final call for speakers. Are there any members of the public attending in person who wish to speak to this bylaw? Are there any speakers on Zoom?
Excuse me. Not at this time.
And are there any speakers calling in?
Not at this time.
Have we received any additional emails to communityinput@ucluelet.ca?
We have not received any additional emails to communityinput@ucluelet.ca.
Thank you. I now declare public hearing for District of Ucluelet Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 1320-2022 closed at 5:41 p.m. Thank you for coming in. We are now moving into item 7, unfinished business. Is there any unfinished business? Okay, number 8, bylaws. There are 2 bylaw items today. Bylaw agenda item 8.1 is Cemetery Management Amendment Bylaw number 1323. Ms. Fortune, can you please provide a brief overview of your report?
I gotta start wearing high heels. Sorry, my apologies. There we go. Before you, Council, you have the final adoption for the District of Ucluelet Cemetery Management Amendment Bylaw number 1323, 2022. Just a reminder that this amends the Cemetery Management Bylaw to allow for raised memorials on the burial sites in the lower cemetery that match existing raised memorials. So this is the final step. Any questions?
Thank you. Does council have any questions for Ms. Fortune? There is a staff recommendation. Would council like to make a motion?
I got it. I will move that council adopt the District of Ucluelet Cemetery Management Amendment Bylaw number 1323, 2022.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed, and that carries. Thank you, Ms. Fortune. Zoning amendment. Bylaw agenda item 8.2 is zoning amendment for 2108 Peninsula Road. This will be presented by the Director of Community Planning. After the Director presents, the applicant will have an opportunity to address council. Ms. Whitney Brown, the floor is yours. Mr. Gregg? Mr. Gregg, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and through the mayor. So this application, I'll give a brief overview. It is on the one hand, I would just say as a sort of preamble, it's about a single tourist accommodation unit. But on the other hand, it does raise some questions about the balance of housing, tourist accommodation, and growth, and doesn't fit neatly within the existing bylaws or policies that the district has had to date. So I'll certainly be here to answer any questions as best I can. So it's sort of unavoidable talking about some of the bigger picture issues, but really the application. This is an application for the specific property, and the applicant deserves a fair decision and sort of hearing of what they're proposing on their requested bylaw change. So I'll start with just describing that. So this is the property at 2108 Peninsula Road, which is shown on the aerial photo on the screen there. And so the applicant, Mr. Hilder, is seeking a zoning amendment to allow additional secondary permitted uses on the property, including a secondary suite and tourist accommodation suite as part of that. It is a bit of a unique property. It's in the CD1, which is the CD1 Comprehensive Development Zone, which is the Eco-Industrial Park, which is the Forbes Road Light Industrial Area. That's the label of that zoning. And as you can see on the screen on the photo here, this is the CD1 is this sort of green area. I'm not sure my cursor is showing here. I'll see if I can highlight it a little better. There we go. That should show. So the CD1 is this is Forbes Road and the Forbes Road Light Industrial Area. And the subject property is this little appendage over here, which was part of the overall lands that were rezoned all at once. So it is the one property that has this kind of context of fronting on Peninsula Road. And There's been, I should also say, there's been some back and forth between the applicant and staff of trying to understand what sort of fits best and how do things fit within our bylaw. And I would note that there's a late item on the agenda, which is correspondence, which is really the current updated letter of the applicant's intent, and I think describes pretty well what they're looking for. As I mentioned, the property is unique, not just in that it's a little different than the light industrial properties on Forbes Road, as we sort of maybe imagine them, but it also has a fish-bearing stream that runs through it, which the applicant has taken some care to coexist with, I'd say. There's a public pathway easement, or actually it's a dedicated public path right-of-way that runs on the north or northwest side of the property. And there's a house under construction on the property, and they're sort of figuring out what are the future uses here. So all of that said to say that the context of this may recommend that a site-specific kind of unique zoning approach may be appropriate for this property, in that it may be suited to some residential uses, but it also has frontage on Peninsula Road, so some commercial light industrial use, it would be perhaps appropriate, but also recognizing the sort of it's not your typical light industrial property. So they are proposing what is essentially adding to single family, I should say, is a permitted use in their existing zoning. So they have a building permit currently to build a single family home. And the zoning amendment would add, that they're requesting is to add an additional tourist accommodation suite in what had been shown as being a sort of a future workshop space in the lower level of the home. And that would be somewhat not consistent with the previous direction that council had provided around this sort of tourist accommodation suite with a separate entrance. It's not operating as a traditional bed and breakfast, but really kind of a separate tourist accommodation use. They are also proposing a secondary suite to have a long-term tenant in there. And so there are a number of recommendations in front of council of some options. We haven't brought a bylaw together, but really suggesting that would be what staff feel would be most consistent would be to go to draft a bylaw to accommodate the uses, but with the tourist accommodation, that suite to be authorized through a temporary use permit. And I'd note that in Mr. Hilder's letter, he comments and is quite open to having sort of a condition of the business license for the tourist accommodation be that they have a long-term tenant. I want to recognize that. So it's sort of the long-term tenant being sort of the primary thing, and that the tourist accommodation would be subject to that. And that perhaps could be accommodated through zoning or through a restrictive covenant. That's also something that a temporary use permit is a tool that is used frequently by communities to have that sort of conditional use, land use approval through that. But there are other possibilities of how we could approach this. So I hope that helps with some of the context. Maybe I'll just pause there and see if there are any questions about the report or what's being asked of council.
Thank you, Mr. Gregg. Any questions for staff at this time? Councillor Hoare?
So if we were to require a long-term renter in the one space before there could be short-term rental, who would oversee that? Because we don't currently have any sort of system for that. Would that be a bylaw thing through the mayor to staff?
Through the mayor, it could be something that is done. Either is there a complaint that someone's not in compliance and we would investigate, or with an annual renewal of a license, sort of checking in and saying, do you have evidence that the long-term tenant is there? I'm spitballing, if you will, what the options would be, but those are the kinds of mechanisms, particularly with if it were a condition or were tied to a business license. When someone's annually renewing that business license, it's sort of, we do check in with, are you in compliance with your zoning and other bylaw or covenant requirements?
Do you have a follow-up to that, Councillor Hoare?
A little bit. I'm also curious because the late edition, while it mentions rezoning, it also says that they wish to maintain their current industrial zoning. So I'm a little confused about what zoning request is on the table.
Through the mayor, perhaps I can clarify. I think there are some elements of the light industrial which they've indicated they would like to have the ability to maintain. The sort of like a wood shop, workshop space. I believe a jewelry studio is also mentioned in there, and I could see those being as quite complementary with this, again, unique site, which has that Peninsula Road frontage, which for those commercial uses could be quite successful. But that would be worked out through the zoning and the bylaw. If council moves this forward in one direction or another, I anticipate we'd be coming back with a draft of the zoning bylaw with those specific uses listed. But it's my understanding that primarily they're looking for the sort of the workshop, wood shop, commercial use, as well as a jewelry studio.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Mafty?
Yeah, through the mayor, I'm not clear from the letter if there's been a clear indication to staff whether the workshop / jewelry studio would be rented to a third party as a commercial space, or would it just be a commercially zoned space that would be used by the owner of the property?
Through the mayor, I don't have that detail, and that may be something that the applicant could speak to. But zoning also, I would just suggest, it doesn't necessarily differentiate between who the user is on a site, particularly on commercial sites where you may have different uses and tenants. Many of the, like you can imagine in Forbes Road, you do have some properties where you have multiple commercial tenants on site. So it may be a mix, but the applicant could perhaps provide a bit of that context as well.
Thank you.
Through the mayor.
Councillor Kennington.
Currently, the zoning allows for everything that they are proposing other than the 500 square foot STR. Is that correct?
Through the mayor, yes, I would say there's a bit of cleanup in the zoning would be a great part of this as well. Because it is in the comprehensive development zone, the CD1 has a number of subzones. There's a more light industrial as well as a single family residential component. And this one is a little bit in the middle, and the CD subzone map, frankly, just missed it. So it's not entirely clear. So there's a chance to clarify what's the appropriate mix of uses. Because if you think of the CD1, it's the Forbes Road, the light industrial areas, but also those homes that are on Pacific Crescent that are just single family residential.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a bit of crossover between light industrial and residential, and then there's this lot. So I say yes, generally, and the light industrial allows quite a wide range of uses, some of which I don't think the applicant is ever anticipating that they would fit on that site, and so site-specific zoning may just clean that up to really reflect what's the likely and desired use of the land.
Right, and the properties next door are CS2, which allow for mixed use commercial and hotel and tourist accommodation.
Through the mayor, that's correct. That there's a more, that Peninsula Road frontage generally has a different zoning designation. The one other property within that Forbes Road and light industrial that fronts on to Peninsula is where the Co-op gas station is located. But the ones in between are under, as you say, the CS2 commercial designation.
Thank you.
Councillor Anderson, anything from you?
Yeah, no, it does seem like a unique property, and I had the opportunity to go take a peek at it yesterday. I just went for a drive with my son to go take a look at Peninsula there. Yeah, I definitely, you can tell that it is a unique situation with the water course running through basically splits that property in two. So yeah, and I actually took a peek at the 500 square foot structure at the bottom, and yeah, I mean, I think it made sense to me the way that it looked, because it almost seemed like there was a bit of a capitulation that has to be made because of the property is in the unique situation where he has to give a fair bit of that land. But yeah, those are my comments for right now.
Thank you. If there's no further questions, this is the opportunity for the applicant to address council. Is the applicant attending in person? Hello. Please go to the microphone, state your name and address. Thank you.
Shane Hilder, owner at 2108 Peninsula Road. Yeah, with this application, I'm trying to strike a balance between adding long-term accommodation for the community, but at the same time being able to afford a very complicated, very expensive build that's only getting more expensive with time, it seems. Yeah, and then the desire to maintain the industrial zoning. It's what we like, my partner and I, Tia. We'd like to have a single-family dwelling, long-term at the front in the basement, short-term at the back, and then at the back of the property have a 600 square foot woodworking studio and a jewelry studio, all in one. And it would be just strictly workshop space. It wouldn't be retail. There wouldn't be tourists coming and going. It would just be space for us to create cabinetry, jewelry, and then sell these products through other avenues, but it wouldn't be retail on the property. I'm open to any questions you guys may have that I can help clarify.
Does council have any questions for the applicant? Councillor Hoare?
I just got a little confused when you were speaking. So the workshop would be separate from the main building?
That's correct. Yeah, it would be 30 meters behind the house or so. The driveway extends past the house. The lot is an acre, so it's a large chunk of land, but the watercourse that runs through it does divide, and it does limit where it can place things.
Yeah, and that's what I was curious where the workshop was meant to be sited on the property because of where the watercourse and the restrictions around the watercourse lay. So I that's why I thought it was all one building initially, because there is room to do that within the restrictions around the watercourse to have the separate building.
Look at the site plan there at the very back of the property. There is a area that's about 14 meters wide by about 40 feet, and that would be the site where there would be the studios for crafting. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Councillor Mashti?
Yeah, through the mayor. So just to clarify, I didn't mean to cut you out when I was asking staff, but if you can clarify your position on the workshop, my understanding is that it would be for your personal use as the property owner rather than having a specific plan at this point to rent it out to somebody else.
Yeah, I'm a cabinet maker, so it would be my space to make cabinetry and Tia's space to make jewelry. She's a goldsmith and silversmith, so yeah, it'd be for our personal use. Yeah.
Thank you.
Would council like to make a motion? Thank you. You can sit down.
I guess I'll make a motion
Councillor
to
Kennington?
get the ball rolling. I have put a lot of thought into this and read through it several times, and I would like to move option C, the first option C, not the duplicate option C, to direct staff to draft a bylaw to allow the uses on the subject property as requested.
Do I have a seconder?
I would second that.
Councillor Anderson. Further discussion? Councillor Hoare?
I'll just mention that does not allow for it's the safety concerns that are dealt with in oh God, speak, Jen, speak. Sorry. When I was reading the options, the issue around safety concerns in short-term rentals versus that are constructed like this versus hotels have very different requirements, and the option C does not include some of those safety things, and that to me is quite a concern because that's fire safety and various other construction safety issues.
Absolutely, that's a good point. There seems to be a need to sort of blend some of these options. So my reason for choosing C was I'm not a big fan of the temporary use permit, strictly because it doesn't give people the kind of security knowing how much money they should put into this going forward, and every 3 years have to use up valuable staff time, pay a fee, and delay other projects that may be in the queue. As far as the safety concern, as a designer, I know what that entails, and it's not very much. So if we can perhaps add that to it, that it does have the dual layer of drywall and that the plumbing fittings are meeting code, which is essentially all it is penetrations through the fire membrane. The cost would probably be about $500 to the applicant to bring it up to that kind of code.
If you'd like to go back to the microphone, sure.
I just wanted to mention that I'm more than happy to build to that option B standard of the multifamily housing with the fire separation. I am currently building the house on my own, so I'm doing all the labor, milling all the wood for the timber frame and everything else. So I'm more than happy. I as Ian mentioned, it's not very much work to add that dual drywall and insulation. So more than happy to have a look at option B if that makes everyone more comfortable.
Councillor Mafty?
I read your letter and I looked through the material that you presented. I'm certainly sympathetic to the requests and to the circumstances, and there's a lot that I find appealing and encouraging. I do hesitate at approving a short-term rental under circumstances that I feel that a lot of people would relate to. I think that there are a significant number of people in the community that are facing similar challenges, and if we approve every request, we end up facing, a set of challenges that we're already struggling with. And so for me, looking at it, it's a question of how to weigh the good versus the bad. And to put it bluntly, I think the short-term rental part of it is bad. I understand how it works for you. I understand the specifics of the site, and I think you've thought it through quite well. So it's not a cut and dried thing for me, but I'm definitely a little bit reluctant to see a short-term rental go in. But again, I think you've justified where you're coming from to my satisfaction. So it's just a judgment call at this point.
Councillor Anderson?
Am I still on here? Yeah. It seemed, I popped in to take a look at the property and I got to speak to Mr. Hilder, and yeah, it seemed like there may have been a bit of a history too, where he's owned this property for a while. And there was some back and forth with the district, if I understood correctly, and that he had made, or he had made it vocal his intent to have some sort of short-term rental at some point, and was, talking to the district about that. But it sounded like Mr. Hilder was actually fishing and away during the time that we were doing the B&B changeover and amending those rules. So he wasn't here to confront that at that time. So a lot of those changes went through while he was out on the boat up north fishing. So the combination of that with the fact that it's such a unique property, and to be honest, to go out there and see the property, he's building it himself. He's got the mills out there. He's doing a lot of the work. To me, it feels like if this isn't sort of the spirit of Ucluelet, I don't know what is. So it's hard for me not to be in favor of the idea of the STR, because I think at the end of the day, I don't think he'll be able to afford this. otherwise.
Councillor Kennington?
Through the mayor, I just wanted to mention that the precedent being set here, really, if you look at it, is he's providing us a secondary suite, which is long-term housing, which is maybe a little bit different than your average person out there who wants to do a B&B in their house. We could go back and say, well, Shane built us a secondary suite, right? So on this property, we are providing an additional STR in a zone that I would argue is going to be largely hotels one day. But we have to look at what we're getting out of this, which is 2 long-term housing units, one for himself and one for a community member. And I think that's, if every property that was doing a B&B provided 50% of their rentable space, a secondary suite, our housing crisis would be solved. So in this situation, I fully support this application. Now, going back to B, I read it, if we can repeal what I have said and make a new motion for B.
I think we need to vote on your first motion, and then someone can do a second motion.
Okay, so
So are we ready to call, Mr. Lawrence?
Yeah, just for a point of clarity. So in order to move, if council's prerogative was to go back and move option B, if that's the goal of council, then option C, the motion on the floor would need to be defeated, and then you would need to move and second a new option.
I think that's what I just said, but thank you.
Sorry.
Okay, so we're ready to call the question. So all those in favor of option C? Any opposed? And that motion is defeated. Now, would you like to move option B, Councillor Kennington?
I will move to direct staff to draft a bylaw to allow the uses on the subject property as requested and explore mechanisms to ensure a suitable level of life safety requirements for any suites.
Mr. Lawrence?
Pardon me, your worship. The option B, that was the summary of it. So there is the suggested motion down below.
I'll try again. Sorry. I'll move that council direct staff to draft a zoning bylaw amending the uses of at 2108 Peninsula Road as requested by the applicant and explore mechanisms to ensure a suitable level of life safety requirements for any suites.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Councillor Hoare?
I don't know if it's related specifically to this one. I'm still on the idea of temporary use permits and the reasons why not, because I know we need accommodation. I know this gives us one long-term one, but we currently don't have any way to ensure that they actually have somebody in that long-term suite. Not that I'm saying that you're not, it's not a personal thing. It's just, we don't have a mechanism to check, and the temporary use permit, coming back to, we have a way to write it into the temporary use permit unless we can write it into a zoning bylaw, but that seems like I don't know if that could happen through the mayor to staff.
Mr. Gregg?
Through the mayor. We'll try and do it through the zoning, if not a covenant, if that's the direction of council. That one of the things that we've looked at is it may be, you have principal uses and then secondary uses, and is it that the tourist accommodation becomes a tertiary use, if that's a term, where it really is, the secondary suite is secondary to there being occupancy of the main house. Well, maybe we can write the bylaw in a way that the temporary or the tourist accommodation would be secondary to there being a suite that's occupied. I suspect, well, this is the kind of thing which we will draft and then get some legal advice on the details of it. It may also be that a restrictive covenant may be part of what is recommended if council wishes to, adopt this in the zoning, that it be subject to putting some site specific, requirements on title to make this work.
Would that satisfy you, Councillor Hoare?
I do understand that temporary use permits, it's being able to go and get a loan. I understand that a lot of times it's like, well, you only have 3 years with this, and I do get that. So the potential for actually doing something like that where there is that, I just want that little catch so that we ensure that there is somebody long-term on there. Not that I don't know a million people who are looking for long-term rental. But I just feel like we really need to find a way to tie the long-term to the ability to have that short-term.
I think Mr. Gregg is indicating that there is a way to do that. Any further discussion? Councillor Mafty?
Yeah, through the mayor, on a similar note, I think I understand where the applicant is coming from. I think I understand the situation, and personally, I'm leaning towards a temporary use permit that would satisfy a lot of those conditions. With the difference, well, it does a few things differently that would make it appeal to me more. Number one, it makes it clear that council isn't just approving short-term rentals through loopholes, or at least giving the community the impression that short-term rentals are okay as long as you can justify them. It allows the applicant to move forward with their plans, and it also leaves the door open for a couple of things. Number one, to make sure that the plan of having a long-term rental is fulfilled, whether that's through a covenant or it's written into the permit or whatever we can see. And I think it also leaves the door open for the applicant to perhaps, later on down the road, maybe it turns out that from an economic point of view, it's actually preferable to have a long-term tenant in there. The market could change or whatever. I feel like writing in a rezoning saying, yes, this is a short-term rental, basically guarantees that that's going to be a short-term rental in perpetuity. And I feel that for the reasons that the applicant wants a short-term rental, a temporary use permit would make as much sense and would achieve a lot of the same goals. And I guess I'm looking to staff to set me straight if I'm misunderstanding any of the technicalities of that.
Mr. Gregg.
Through the mayor, I think Councillor Mafty has captured that dead on. The staff recommendation is that perhaps the best tool for this would be a temporary use permit. And I'll add, in most North American jurisdictions, they refer to these things as conditional use permits rather than temporary use permits. For some reason in BC, the legislation calls them temporary use permits. It's that, how do you allow a use on a property conditionally? And I think that's what sometimes the community is maybe sort of struggling with, or this discussion around what's the best tool to use. Because the difference between putting in the zoning sort of permanently does affect property values in a different way than a permit. And it seems that with the balance of, in the community, what are the impacts of the total amount of tourist accommodation and the balance of housing, and then what that balance is and how that affects growth in the community. Those are all larger questions than just this application, but we're recommending that that is an option, is to do it as allow the uses that the owners are seeking, but it does, I think, have a different impact of whether it's by permit or by adopting a bylaw to put it permanently, if you will, in the zoning.
Thank you, Mr. Gregg. Further discussion, Councillor Kennington.
Through the mayor. Sorry, Bruce. Back to the podium. What is the longest TUP that can be written?
It's a good question. So in BC, it used to be 2 years. Temporary use permits were added, Expo 86 really brought them about, where the province said, hey, municipalities, here's a way to allow accommodation around, because people are going to come and see the whole province, and so put campsites everywhere, and here's a tool to use it. And they've been used for all kinds of things in between. Originally, it was 2 years. It is now, in the last several years. It's a 3-year term is the maximum that council can issue a temporary use permit for. A temporary use permit could be issued for a day, but maximum 3 years. Then it could be renewed for a term of up to 3 years, and then the applicant could apply for a new permit. There's nothing stopping it being a rolling process. And there are cases where temporary use permits, I think an example of the campground in the Victoria area, it's been since 1986 they've been operating under temporary use permits, where it's just every couple of years they're renewing their permit, and it's a bit of a check-in with the neighbors on how are the noise complaints and how's the parking working and all that kind of stuff. But it really is a conditional approval. They're meeting the conditions that they need to meet, and so then the use is authorized ongoing as opposed to a one-time approval. Does that help?
Thank you.
Any further discussion? So we'll have to vote on this motion before another motion could be put forward. So we're voting on option B. All those in favor? And opposed? And it's defeated. So now we are probably looking at option A. If somebody would like to move that for discussion. Councillor Hoare.
I will move that council indicate to the applicant that rezoning the property at 2108 Peninsula Road to permit a tourist accommodation suite would not align with community needs, and direct staff to work with the applicant to 1. Draft a zoning amendment bylaw to tailor the zoning of the property to allow for the other commercial uses sought by the owner, and 2. To pursue the tourist accommodation use through a temporary use permit.
I would second that.
Thank you. Further discussion? It's your motion, Councillor Hoare. Do you have anything further to add?
No, but no, but yes. I just realized what I said. I actually, it's funny, Mr. Gregg has never mentioned that they're called conditional use permits in other jurisdictions before. And because temporary isn't perhaps the best use of that particular word. Yeah, I agree with Councillor Mafty on this one. I think it is the best system because I do like those checks and balances as well.
Any further discussion?
Through the mayor.
No. Councillor Kennington?
Yeah, I just want to point out that prior to the B&B amendment that went through, I had conversations with the planning department, and I was assured at that time that a lot of these rules were to stop, foreign buyers and people from out of town coming and buying up homes and putting B&Bs in them, and they're not contributing to our town. And I feel like in this situation, it's unique from that, in that the sense that this is a local family doing local things. As Sean said, it doesn't get any more Ucluelet than this. And these are exactly the kinds of applications that we were supposed to consider. So I think just blanket denying it based on something that's not really related, which is an R1 zoning, and just a B&B suite, I think we owe everyone in this town the opportunity to see that they have a chance of doing something. And it's not necessarily setting a negative precedence. It's a positive one, in that we will work together and we will find solutions to the housing crisis and allow people to fund it through an STR. Because as the applicant mentioned, he's talking about $130,000 to finish that suite. I think that's pretty conservative. I think he's probably pretty close. He's doing it himself. There's absolutely zero incentive to build that suite. None. At $1,000 a month for a 500 square foot unit, it's going to take him 20 years. So why would you even do it when he needs a workshop? Because in addition to that, he's going to have to build a workshop. So I think we really need to think long and hard about, who these rules apply to and where they're appropriate. Because this, as I said, it's in a CS2 zone, essentially, in an industrial zone. It's not like somebody on Pass-and-Milford's going to come up and say, oh, well, you let this happen in an industrial zone. Why can't I do it in a single-family zone? So I just want to be clear that that's where I stand on this, and it's not that I'm pushing B&Bs everywhere. It's just this is a unique situation. Thank you.
Thank you, but we aren't denying the process. We're just sort of restricting it to a temporary use permit, but that can certainly be rolled over every 3 years if need be, because I understand the need to generate some income in order to complete the project on the property. Any further discussion? Councillor Mafty?
Through the mayor, it's not my intention to sidetrack this into an internal discussion. I agree with a lot of the points that Councillor Kennington made. I feel that as a council, we are facing a difficult decision if we treat every applicant based on how we feel that individual represents town values or real Ucluelet. I think that there's real merit to the proposal, and I think that figuring out a constructive way to allow the requested use without necessarily, opening the door for everyone else to follow suit achieves the objectives, most of the objectives that the applicant is looking for, and it lets council sort of take a step back from making decisions on who does council like or who does council feel appeals to our sensibilities. And so I hear your points and I think they're valid, but I would just like to say that I think there's a constructive way to achieve almost everything that's being asked for without putting council in a position that we might wish we weren't in later on down the road.
Thank you. Anything further? Call the question. We're voting on option A at the moment. All in favor? And any opposed? And that carries. Good discussion. There are 3 report items today. The first report, Councillor Kennington is going to recuse himself.
Through the mayor, I must recuse myself as I have an interest in this project.
Thank you. The first report item is 9.1, Environmental Development Permit for 1239 Sunset Point Road. This report is by the Planning Assistant, and after the Planning Assistant presents, there will be an opportunity for the applicant to address council. Ms. Whitney Brown, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Is this on? Great. So one of the changes brought by the adoption of the new OCP, the one that's currently in action, was better protection of Ucluelet's environmental values through the creation of development permit areas. And we do receive quite a few questions regarding environmental DPs from the public, so I thought I would take the opportunity to briefly go over these permits for council's benefit and for the benefit of any of our members of the public listening, to have some clarity on this process before I present the 2 applications. So briefly, the objectives of environmental development permits are to guide development and use land wisely to ensure that the most sensitive environmental features of a site are protected and ecological functions are not needlessly disturbed by development activities. So Schedule E of the OCP is this map, which you can see on the screen, and it shows the environmental DP areas. Green is terrestrial, the light blue is the marine shoreline setback, and then the sort of darker, more vibrant blue is riparian areas. And any development in these properties on these maps requires council approval through an environmental development permit, before any clearing or work takes place. And so the DP doesn't concern underlying use, and it doesn't replace any necessary variances or rezonings, but it can be used in place of an excavation permit. So that's kind of where it sits. And for all land lying in one of these areas, it requires that the applicant obtain a QEP, a qualified environmental professional, to prepare an environmental report on the site. And the guidelines for those QEPs are kind of outlined in the OCP itself to follow. So these reports typically contain measures which the QEP recommends is necessary to keeping the ecological function of the site. And staff then draft the conditions of the development permit, usually directly from those QEP recommendations. So as this is a fairly new aspect of the OCP, the process for approving and guiding environmental DPs may be something that council wishes to consider in the new year as part of their review of the development application procedures bylaw, and that could include creation of kind of specific UCLUIT terms of reference for QEPs or delegated authority to streamline that process, but that's sort of where we're at. So now I will move on to the action. Oh, that's just a nice picture. The environment. So this is the first presentation here is development permit application 2220. It's for a permit at 1239 Sunset Point Road, and the applicant is planning the construction of a 3,400 square foot single family dwelling, as well as a set of stairs on the site's vegetated slope leading to a 98 square foot deck on the vegetated outcrop there, which will also have an affixed engineering drainage pipe under the stairs as a way to deal with drainage on their site. And the property is in the Marine Shoreline Development Permit area. So if you go to the next slide, there you can see. So the applicant has retained a qualified environmental professional to prepare a report on the environmental considerations. And the QEP concluded that the nature and extent of proposed development has limited potential to cause harm to environmentally sensitive areas, as long as the recommended mitigation measures are followed. So staff have drafted the development permit before you with conditions identified by the QEP in their report. And those are what the applicant would have to comply with to pursue this development. So this time I'm happy to answer any questions, and council should of course give the applicant an opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Does council have any questions? I had one quick one for you. Is the QEP going to do spot checks or be on site during some of the construction?
Yeah, so one of the conditions is that the QEP, particularly around the development that happens on or is proposed to happen on that vegetated bank. So there's conditions built into the, I think it's Schedule B of that permit that the QEP I think has to be there for the start of that, and then would return based on their own judgment. So in the event of heavy rainfall that might lead to some destabilization in the slope or other concerns that would prompt that QEP to return. So that would be kind of driven by the QEP deciding when they should return there. But those are specific conditions to this application, yes.
Thank you. And one more question. There's an eagle's nest nearby.
Mm-hmm.
And so the people doing the building are going to be instructed on how best to not damage that?
Yeah, so there is an eagle's nest located quite nearby. I believe in the report the QEP says that it wasn't active at the time, but that has some instructions for if there is any signs there, and that's also guided by the Wildlife Act, which prohibits kind of development during certain nesting seasons. So that, yeah, is also part of the permit there.
Thank you. Any other questions from council for staff?
Got a quick one here.
This is the opportunity for the applicant to address council. Oh,
Councillor Anderson.
oh, Councillor Anderson. Sorry, I didn't see your hand up.
Yeah, sorry. Quick question through the mayor. I'm wondering. It looks like that little sliver there, that common property. That's that little walkway, I think, that goes along the side. So I guess that just stays the same, and then there's a fence against it. Is that how that works, or does that change at all, that walkway, or does it just remain exactly as it was originally?
Through the mayor to staff, that's district right of way, with the boardwalk out to a kind of a viewing platform. That wouldn't change at all with this application. The application would just take place on their own property, and so it would look a little different beside it, but it doesn't actually impact the right of way there.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Whitney Brown. This is the opportunity for the applicant to address council. Is the applicant attending in person? Excellent. Please go to the podium and state your name and address.
Mike Baird, 1780 Larch Road. We're the applicant. It's pretty straightforward. We're not asking for anything. We're following all the rules and bylaws, but open for questions.
Does council have any questions for the applicant? No, doesn't look like it. You can take a seat. Thank you. There is a staff recommendation. Would council like to make that motion? Councillor Mafty? Oh,
It's okay, I'll make the
Councillor
motion.
Hoare.
I will move that council authorize the Director of Community Planning to execute and issue Environmental Development Permit DP 22-20 for the property at 1239 Sunset Point Road to allow the construction of a single-family dwelling on a lot designated within a marine shoreline development permit area.
And a seconder?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion?
I just want to say that I like what's written into the environmental permits and the steps that are required, and the fact the QEP has to be, on site for certain parts of the construction to mitigate things. Hopefully there's no problems, Mike, but thank you for the thoroughness.
It was a great report. Any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed, and that carries. Thank you. Agenda report item 9.2 is environmental development permit, 848 Marine Drive. This report is also provided by the planning assistant, and the applicant will have an opportunity to speak after the planning assistant presents. Ms. Whitney Brown.
Excuse me, we're just waiting for Councillor Kennington to come back.
Oh, sorry. We're on 9.2, Councillor Kennington.
So, this application is again for another environmental development permit, this time at 848 Marine Drive, which you can see there in that satellite image. The applicant is planning the construction of 4 cottages, one of which would be used as a single-family dwelling for this time, and 3 of which would be guest cottages per their guest house zoning. The property is in a terrestrial marine shoreline and riparian DP area. See if you flip to the next. There you can see it. And the proposal makes use of areas of the property which were previously cleared and stays clear of a 7.5 meter rear setback established by a green space covenant on site. So the applicant has retained a QEP as well to prepare a detailed report, and they concluded that the proposed works as outlined can be completed successfully if mitigation measures included are followed. So once more, staff have used these recommendations to form the conditions of the permit before you. And at this time, once again, I'm happy to answer questions, and council should give the applicant a chance to speak as well.
Thank you. Does council have any questions for staff? No, doesn't look like it.
I've got a question. Oh, sorry.
Oh, Councillor Anderson. You're so tiny on the screen, sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry, I had a question. It was just Maybe I'm not reading it here, but what is the size, the acreage? What's the size of the lot?
Just one moment. Through the mayor, it's 4,432 square meters.
Perfect. That's like roughly just over an acre. Is that
Yeah, it's quite a large lot.
right? And then there's 4 cottages down in the lower section, and then eventually, I believe that the applicant wants to build at the top at the end. I think that's the idea.
Yeah, that's their proposal at this point. So they would, I believe, and the applicant might be able to speak to this a bit better, but their proposal would be to build these cottages first, and then I think once they've generated some capital, then to build their long-term single-family dwelling up in that upper cleared section.
Right. Yeah, that's a nice lot. I've seen that. That's what I remember when that first got cleared. That's a really nice area.
Any other questions for staff? I have one. Something incredibly similar to this came before us about a year ago, and I think it was turned down because there was not enough on-site parking. Is this the same applicant? Do you know?
Through the mayor, I've only worked here for 7 months, so I would pass that question to the director of community planning.
Mr. Gregg.
This is a new application, and I believe a new applicant on this one.
Wow, because the one that came before us was exactly the same, wanting to build 4 cabins, live in one while they built the other 3, and then build their single-family residence last. Maybe it's just coincidence. It just seems not you. No, okay. It was unbelievably similar.
Through the mayor, I'd have to, we'd have to clarify which application, if we're remembering the same one, but I believe there was one that was on Marine Drive down towards Odyssey Lane. It was very similar in that respect as well.
That would be the one. And this one clearly has provided enough parking for all the things they're going to build there.
They had definitely have adequate space, particularly with there's a cleared area up above as well, where presumably the future main house would be, if they followed through with those plans. So there's certainly space for adequate parking.
Perfect, thank you. Any other questions from council? Oh, Councillor Anderson?
Nope.
Oh, your hand's still up.
Oh.
There, it's gone now.
Sorry.
I see there is a staff recommendation. Would council like to make a motion? Oh, would the applicant like to speak? I don't think so, because we had no questions for staff, so, okay. So would council like to make a motion?
I could do that.
Councillor Anderson?
I would motion that council authorize the Director of Community Planning to execute and issue development permit 22-15 for the property at 848 Marine Drive to allow a 4-cabin guest house development.
Thank you. And a seconder?
I'll second it.
Councillor Hoare. Any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed, and that carries. Thank you. You don't have to stay if you don't want to. Run away. The final agenda report item is 9.3, 2023 Council Appointments. This report is provided by the Manager of Corporate Services, Mr. Rotenberg.
Through the mayor, we're looking for 2 motions today. The first is the confirmation of appointments. A point of clarification, this chart on the back here has a bunch of the appointments you guys have already made at previous meetings, with the exception of the following: the Ucluelet Tourism Association appointment, the Coastal Community Network appointment, the Barclay Community Forest appointment, and the Groundfish Trawl Advisory Committee appointments. Otherwise, the Vancouver Island Library Board appointment has already been made, along with the alternate, along with the Health Network Table of Partners appointments, and the ACRD Board appointment. So just a point of clarification there. The other thing we're looking for here is for council to adopt an acting mayor schedule. The acting mayor stands in place of the mayor in the event that the mayor is unable to act or the office is vacant. What we're recommending here is a quarterly schedule where everybody gets their shot, which sometimes can result in acting mayors chairing meetings and other times may not. It just depends on whether the mayor is able to attend or not. I'm here to answer any questions if council has any.
I had a question about the Groundfish Trawl Advisory Committee. Has that already been appointed to me, or is that one that we can discuss tonight?
Yeah, so that's one of the ones that we should discuss, that council could discuss tonight. In this case, I believe the Groundfish Paul is a liaison appointment rather than an appointment to sit on that board.
And do you know how often that group meets?
Very little information about it. I know historically mayors have acted as liaison to that board, or excuse me, to that committee.
I'm just thinking that kind of falls in Councillor Hoare's sort of background in fisheries, and wondered if she might be interested in taking that on.
It does fall in my wheelhouse, and I did actually contact the previous mayor for more information. And they meet during hake season and for about 3 days, and it might be a little tight, but I'm pretty sure I can make that happen. And I've certainly worked with some of the other people that liaise on that committee as well. I'll give it a shot.
So so the recommendation is going to change then, if we move that?
Yes, so if you take a look at, let me see, it's the second option here. And you'll see the resolution sort of bolded at the bottom of page 169, the council amend the 2023 council appointments attached to this report, yada, yada, yada. You would let us know how you'd like to amend it by making that motion, and then you would adopt the amended appointment schedule using number 2. And then, so I don't get confused because I'm already confusing myself, the second recommendation at the beginning of the report on page 167 would stand because we still need a motion about the acting mayor schedule. And
Great.
Of course, council could amend that schedule if they were so inclined.
Okay, well, we'll start with recommendation number 1. And so we would go to option B, that council amend the 2023 council appointments attached to report number 22-168 as Appendix A as follows. And that would be to have Councillor Hoare as the council liaison appointment to the Groundfish Trawl Advisory Committee. Okay.
And is there tourism looking to be filled as well? Is that yourself as well?
Yeah, yeah. I'll need a seconder for this motion, correct? Or do we completely fill those little lines out and then move it?
What I would suggest here is, because I'm sure you want to have discussion on each one of these appointments, I would suggest doing the amendment and dealing with this resolution first, and then if you wanted to further amend the appointment schedule by through discussion regarding Tourism Ucluelet, you could do that in a separate motion.
Okay, so the motion is to have Councillor Hoare as the council liaison appointment to the Groundfish Trawl Advisory Committee. So we'd like a seconder for that, is that correct? Councillor Mafty. And any further discussion? And all in favor? None opposed, that carries. And then the second one is Tourism Ucluelet, you said, Mr. Rotenberg?
I believe Councillor Anderson wants to discuss that appointment.
Oh, I thought we needed to add it. I thought we forgot it when we were doing the amendment, but yeah, I don't mind. I don't mind jumping on that if somebody doesn't already want that, or if the mayor, if you're interested in it.
I'll arm wrestle you for it.
You go ahead.
I was thinking that it would be myself, just because I have a very long history with that group. So I would need a motion to put my name on that external board.
So for clarification, the recommended appointments here already have your name on that external board. So if council elected to further amend these appointments.
Oh, I see it there now.
For example, if another individual wanted to sit in that position, that's the discussion for council to have at this point. Alternatively, if council likes these appointments, including the amendment now related to the Groundfish Trawl Advisory Committee, you would just be looking to adopt this schedule as amended.
And I believe there's something further in our agenda about the CBT. Correct. Okay.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so we do need a motion that then to that council adopt the 2023 council appointments as amended. Councillor Mafti, seconder.
I'll second that.
Councillor Anderson. Any further discussion? All in favor? And carried. And then we need another motion, motion number 2, if somebody could move that. Councillor Hoare.
I will move that Councillors Anderson, Hoare, Kennington, and Mafti be designated to serve as deputy mayor in accordance with the schedule set out in Appendix B to report number 22-168.
And a seconder. Councillor Mafti. Any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed, and that carries. Thank you, Mr. Rotenberg, for taking us through that. Are there any notices of motion? Hearing none, we'll move on to correspondence. There are 3 correspondence items. The first one is Japanese Canadian Pavilion Interpretive Center. And this has been put forward by the Historical Society. They are planning to apply for funding through the Japanese Canadian Legacy Society, which will administer the redress fund announced on May 21st, 2022, when the Premier of British Columbia officially acknowledged the injustice done to Japanese Canadians by the 1942 internment. The province created a redress fund to be distributed in fulfillment of the redress initiatives, education, heritage, community, monument, seniors' health and wellness, and anti-racism. It is anticipated that some portion of the fund will go to creating interpretive centers. I know the applicant are here if council wishes to ask them any questions. Would one of you like to approach the mic just in case there are questions? You go.
Hot potato.
Name and address, please. Thank you. Is there anything you'd like to speak to this about before we ask questions?
This is all very much in the preliminary stages. The money has not been allocated yet to the people who are responsible for building it out. But we've been advised to sort of get our ducks in a row and get letters of support and request and work with the staff member for the location. Even location would be helpful.
Thank you. Does council have any questions for Mr. Timmermans?
It's not a question.
Councillor Hoare?
I just think this is a really good idea, and I am fully in support of us writing a letter.
So there is a motion that's been crafted here that council direct staff to prepare a letter of support for the Ucluelet and Area Historical Society's application to the Japanese Canadian Legacy Society for funding to create a permanent open-air pavilion which houses interpretive panels that tell the story of Japanese Canadian coastal fishing families in the 20th century, and that council direct staff to work with the Ucluelet and Area Historical Society on the open-air pavilion proposal and report back to council. So I will make that motion if someone would like to second that.
I'll second it.
Everybody wants to second it. It's a good
Everybody
one.
wants it.
I think Councillor Kennington jumped on it first. Any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed, and that carries. Thank you so much. Sorry you had to wait so long for that. And the second item is the Girl Guides Guiding Lights Across BC celebration. This takes place on February 22nd, and we've been asked this in previous years to light up in the color blue anything that is a municipal asset, and I believe the past few years we've done the welcome sign at the junction. And yeah, so I have another crafted resolution here that council directs staff to light up in blue the District of Ucluelet sign at the junction of the Tofino-Ucluelet Highway and Highway 4 on February 22nd, 2023 to participate in the Girl Guides Guiding Lights Across BC celebration. If I could get a seconder.
I will second that.
Councillor Hoare. Any further discussion? Oh, we lost Councillor Anderson. Oh, there he is. Sorry, you were whited out there for a bit, Councillor Anderson. You're back. Any further discussion on that one? Okay, all in favor? None opposed, and that carries. And the next item is the alternate appointment to the Clayoquot Biosphere Trust Board of Directors. Mr. Rotenberg, did you have anything to say about this?
Through the mayor, I've been in contact with the executive director for CBT. She explained that we do need to run a public process, so that's an advertisement and then vetting applicants for both the appointment and for the alternative position in order for us to be in alignment with their bylaws. I think their bylaws, they may be another sort of instrument. Her expectation is that we start that process in the new year.
Okay, so nothing has to be done at this meeting?
We have drafted a resolution just to direct us to initiate that process, and I can display that for council's benefit if that's helpful.
Sure. If someone would like to read that. Councillor Mafty.
I'll move that staff initiate the process required for council to appoint a new alternate director to the Clayoquot Biosphere Trust in the new year.
Do I have a seconder?
I'll second that.
Councillor Hoare. Any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed, and that carries. We have 4 information items. We'll start with 12.2, planning. Item 12.2 is information report, planning, building, and bylaw activity report. Mr. Gregg, will you be giving us a brief outline?
I think that microphone is off. Sorry.
Is that a little better?
Oh, that's a lot better. Thank you.
Okay. I just briefly, I think the report summarizes for Councillor Anderson and anyone at home the activity in the department. That it's been a very busy time this year, and but it's a balancing act, and really see if there are any questions from council. I can expand on any aspects of this if you like.
So you are able to put some of these graphs up on the screen for us?
If you wish. I didn't want to presume that you wanted to be, bombarded with our graphs, but we can certainly do that.
No, I love the graphs, definitely. Bombard away. Yeah, bombard away.
And I'll just get the annotation function going here. Okay, so this you're basically pulling some of the numbers in the graphs out of the report. On the upper left on your screen here, this is really the total of applications of the various sort of planning type of applications, development permits and rezonings and development variance, temporary use permits, etc. That's not what we want to do. Here we are. And so what you can see is really over the last 5 years, it's been ramping up steadily, whereas in 2017 we had 27 applications, and this year we had 47 applications, and that's sort of shown graphically below. And I think that this is, that sort of time frame, the last 5 years has been a steady increase in construction and tourist and real estate activity and really sort of, I'd say, intensity of some of the activity in town. On the right is this is one sort, because we have sort of easy data to grab on building permits. And so this is single family dwellings. And where 2022, so far to date when we grab these numbers, appears to be lower. That's actually average. So it's basically this was with the change in interest rates and whatnot, it has softened some of the single family construction starts. But I'd say it overall is still very strong. But what this illustrates is, again, the last 5 years have been a construction boom. When you look sort of the bigger picture. And so the other aspects of the department, so that's planning, building, this is bylaw enforcement interactions. This is really this wheel shows the summer interactions of bylaw enforcement. So in the summer, typically the appearance and presence of visitors takes obviously a higher amount of time and focus of the bylaw department. So the blue that takes up the vast majority of the number of interactions is campers on our various streets and in public places and parks and whatnot. Other major ones are sort of the public drinking and sometimes hand in hand with that are the beach related issues. Those are the two sort of orange and yellow ones. In other years when there's been when there's a fire ban, it's amazing how that tends to shrink and other things take the balance. Other significant one, the green, is parking issues. And then the graph in the lower right is really showing some of the actions of those. So the vast majority, like 95% of the bylaw enforcement actions are really about education. So the green, those are really about just a verbal, making somebody aware. Most people want to comply, and they usually, if they're not in compliance, it's because they're unaware that they're doing something wrong or contrary to our bylaws. sometimes the little yellow graph, which may or may not appear on all screens, is warning notices are another tool that's used often with some of the campers. And the last thing you want to do is hit someone with a ticket if they really don't know what they're doing. But with the campers, particularly if it appears that it's somebody who has rented a camper and they're on vacation. The communication is either if you can catch them in person, have a conversation with them. If not, our officers leave a warning notice, typically, so that person who may be from, another country and is visiting isn't hit with a negative experience of the community. And then the last little graph that does show up in the corner of the MTI ticket, that's a small number of cases require that. And usually that's a repeat interaction, not the first interaction. And the other function here is business licensing. And so again, that sort of, if you look at the last 5 years, it's been ramping up. This year particularly has spiked with a number of new business licenses. And as the report notes, I think we have 542 active business licenses in Ucluelet. For a town of 2,000 people, that is a remarkably high number. I'm curious, it would be fantastic to have some data on that percentage of, what is the ratio of business licenses to residential population across, the province. I think that I can only imagine we're on the very, very high end of that. A good number of those are vacation rental business licenses, but also all of the other, support businesses and other, just, we have a very entrepreneurial and community, I think, and quite a number of self-employed folks as well. So it reflects in the number of business licenses. I think that's an extremely high ratio. For comparison, I worked in a community that had 14,000 residents, and there were 700 business licenses, and with one of the larger industrial parks, which was loaded with all these small businesses, and one of the larger industrial parks on Vancouver Island. So that 542 is really quite remarkable. And the last chart on the far right there is the number of just listings. So this is online listings that are sort of captured with the service that we use. So it's over 350 now, and again, that's sort of shown steady growth over time, over the past 5 years. A bit of a hiccup in in 2019, 2020, things I think sort of leveled off, but I think it's no surprise to anyone that the number of listings has been increasing with demand. So maybe I'll pause there and see if there's any questions on the details.
Does council have any questions for Mr. Craig?
I've got a quick question.
Councillor Anderson?
It's a bit of a weird one, and I don't know if you can answer it. Is there any barometer, and I'm thinking out loud here, to know the supply and demand situation? So when you have short-term rental licenses and business licenses, and is there any way, I'm just trying to think, I think like Tofino used to have the Chamber of Commerce where people could look for accommodation. And then if they were simply, there was nothing. And I remember doing this back 10 years ago or longer, you could look for an accommodation if things were really full in the summertime. And I'm just wondering how many people come here and just at what point are we looking at saturation for short-term rental? Do you know what I'm saying by that? Like at what point are we meeting the demand of the tourist coming out here versus having too little or too much? Is there even a way to measure that?
Through the mayor, I'll offer a couple of things. Statistically, one of the things that we looked at, and it was sort of a bit of a snapshot that council requested, that's in one of the appendices to the official community plan, was to capture how many people do we actually have in town on a peak day in July or August, and the answer to that included about 1,000 day visitors, and so that indicates, and because your accommodation is full essentially at that time, and that's what we've been hearing from Tourism Ucluelet, is that there are quite a few people who can't get any accommodation on the West Coast, so they're staying in Port Alberni and they're coming out for the day, and so that's where some of that number is coming from. And so the other piece of information, if you're looking for data on what is that sort of supply and demand part, is that we collaborated with Tofino and First Nations on the West Coast in doing a land use demand study last year. And one of the things that they looked at was the demand for tourist accommodation, and so this was land economists sort of looking at the whole picture and looking at what the West Coast's sort of role is, and aggregating data on tourist demand and from the province and national sources. And they essentially said there's an unlimited appetite for tourist accommodation. If you build it, they will come. They will fill it in the summertime. That the demand isn't really the issue, and they're it's kind of a given at this point for the foreseeable future on the West Coast. And their recommendations were really about that the coastal communities have a conversation about planning for what is a sustainable carrying capacity. How much is the right amount? How much is too much?
Well,
Did
thank
that
you.
answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Gregg? There's a little red kind of strip at the top of that 350 that says they're non-compliant. That's bylaw having to try and enforce some regulations. Is that correct?
Through the mayor, yes, at any given time. So that 350 is the total listings that show up, and so if you see ones, that's a snapshot in time from November, where at any given time there'll be some who may be unaware, new owners who haven't got a business license or weren't aware that they're in non-compliance. So there's always a certain amount of communication and resolution of those that's ongoing. Fortunately, it's a small fraction.
It is small. Thank you. I don't think there's any other questions. Oh, Councillor Kennington?
I just have a question about there are some companies that come out here almost daily. Are they required to have a local business license, or is it, if they're coming from Nanaimo daily, is there?
If operating, so businesses operating in, whether their base is in Nanaimo or if they're doing business in Ucluelet, they're required to have a business license. So whether it's contractors or consultants, we have a number of consultants that work for the district and take out a business license for that purpose. So
a Ucluelet business license, or
yes.
Yeah, okay.
So I don't have a number on out of the business license what percentage or portion would be mostly based out of town and be doing some business in Ucluelet versus Ucluelet based businesses, though.
And do we have a sort of a threshold to say, someone who's coming out here once every 2 years to do something, do they still need one, or is it if you're sort of making this your service area that would trigger a business license?
The bylaw is quite simple in that if you're doing business in Ucluelet, you should have a business license. So if you're a consultant who's out here to do one project for 3 days, you should have a business license for that purpose. So it's there isn't a threshold of when it kicks in or doesn't kick in.
Councillor Hoare?
Just following up on that, I'm thinking about the tourist buses that come out here. Did those tour companies have business licenses in Ucluelet?
They should.
That's what I thought.
That would be a big job for a bylaw officer to go in and ask to see, because I guess they should actually have the license in their vehicle. Yeah, that would be an interesting project in your spare time.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that's all our questions. Thank you for that report. I love graphs and charts. It's awesome. Item 12.3 is information report, Ucluelet Fire Rescue 2022, quarter 1 to quarter 3 report. And Chief Geddes is going to talk to his report. Welcome, Chief.
Through the mayor. Thank you.
Good evening, through the mayor. Missing part of it there, Julie. Looks like it's not working properly. Should be some words in there as well. All right, I think we're good. So this image represents our response area. The yellow is the entire area which we cover, which is a road rescue area. And council saw this image the other day as well in the orientation. So, and the other colored areas, the blue and red, of course, are our contracted areas as well as our own municipality. So call volume. And these numbers represent the first 3 quarters of the year, obviously. So we had 131 calls in 2022, which averages out over the year to about 174, which would... It's working. All right, so back to our call volumes. So in the first 3 quarters of this year, we were right on pace to match last year's call volume, which had been our busiest year ever, as far as I could find records for. But I can say we've since surpassed that. Being these numbers the first 3 quarters of the year, October was actually our busiest month of the year, even busier than the middle of summer, which was surprising. But so we've well surpassed the call volume for last year. And then previous years, so in 2021, we did 173 total calls, 2020, 114, and 2019, 148. Since the mayor likes charts, I've just threw in a quick chart as well. It represents those same numbers. 2021, you'll see numbers were call volume was down relative to the years around it, and that was due to provincial restrictions on first responders attending calls due to the inception of COVID and a lot of the unknowns. So we didn't respond to a lot of calls at the recommendation of the provincial government. And then you can see we've had a steady increase after that. Here's our breakdown of types of calls for the year. In alphabetical order is the easiest way. So starting in the lower right there, ambulance assist, we did 9 calls. Beach brush fires, 4. Now these are active fires, not necessarily burning complaints, but active fires that were we had to deal with on the beaches. Chimney fires, we had 1. Duty officer investigations, 13. And those are things, typically questions that dispatch has to do with jurisdiction or burning complaints themselves. Typically will come in as a duty officer call. Medical calls, we did 45. Motor vehicle incidents, 20. Is that 1? Sorry, I can't read it. Okay, and Julie, are you able to move that window a bit, please? Structure fires, we had 3. And we had 1 tsunami alert. And then a bunch of other small items of calls. So this includes hydro troubles, marine incidents, wildland fires, fuel leaks. Oh, and then of course alarms. We do a lot of alarm calls. We had 24 of those. So calls outside the municipality, of the 3 structure fires we had, only 1 was actually within the district. And the other 2 were, one was in Tofino and the other one was a Tofino fire, but in a contracted area with Tofino. So it was a mutual aid call we did with, that we did attend with Tofino Fire. During that reporting period, we responded to 26 calls outside the municipal boundary. And this includes and is mostly made up of motor vehicle incidents on the highway. Those calls we do get reimbursement through the government, and that money goes to the Fire Facilities, Vehicles, and Equipment Reserve Fund. And we have multiple service agreements in place with Ucluelet First Nation, Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District. We have 2 agreements with them to do with fire, one for South Long Beach and then the other one for the airport, and as well as an agreement with the District of Tofino. Last year, we signed an agreement with Toquat Nation, which was a little bit outside the box, but it seems like it's going to work for everybody. But Toquat has not enacted that agreement as of yet, so which requires them to get a bunch of training through myself and my fire department on the equipment. So while it's all ready to go, it's been ratified by both sides. We haven't enacted it yet. And constantly working to ensure these agreements stay current. For example, I'm working as we speak with the ACRD on updating their fire service agreement, and as well as Parks Canada. And there's a day we actually handed over our old retired mini pumper to Toquat Nation, and they're quite happy to receive that truck because it does pump quite well. The pump works really well on it. It's just too old for us to use for insurance purposes. So training, as council is aware, we do a lot of training, and in the first 3 quarters we did over 1,800 person hours of training, which is equivalent of 76 days. And as reported last week to council, that the current number on that as of last week was 2,100, and I'm expecting will exceed 2,500 person hours of training in the year. And we recently have firefighters recently completed the NFPA 1001 Firefighter 2 certification program, which is monumental for a small department. I guess I'm very proud of that. And we also have 2 other members that are nearing completion of the program. And we also have 3 members enrolled in the fire officer program, which again is a big step forward and something that I've been working on with my members since the day I got in the door here. So that was a little personal win for me, but very necessary through regulation. So we're getting good buy-in. And then 1 member recently completed Fire Officer 4. This is actually a picture of our annual hose testing, which is a requirement every year, and that's up on Forbes Road, of course. Throughout the year, this past year, every single firefighter in the department is now certified in basic wildfire suppression, as well as fire entrapment avoidance. And that was through UBCM Fire Smart Grant. And through that grant, we had some extra seats, so I thought I'd offer them to our neighbors in Toquat Nation. Took me up on it, and they had a few people in that class, and they were quite ecstatic to take part in that. And there's a picture of the classroom session. And then there's our hands-on part of the day. Here again, we rely on the business community around town, and this is John Robbins Pit. They're a big supporter of fire department. They have a perfect little place for us because obviously we don't have any lakes around here, so they have a nice little lake that we can use for our pump testing as well as training such as wildland firefighting. We also had another real big event as far as training goes, and that was a partnership that we were able to strike with School District 70 and the contractors involved with the construction of the new school and the demolition of the old school. And so we had really had a once-in-a-lifetime training opportunity to get into the old school and use it as a training, a great training prop for a small window once all the abatement was complete and before demolition, which was a real short window. So we had the troops on standby there, and we also invited, as you can see in the picture, you may or may not recognize members of Tofino Fire Department as well. So it was a great opportunity to invite our neighbors and have a real good mutual aid practice. And there's a picture of their aerial. There's also a great opportunity for our members. We don't get a lot of opportunity to train on their aerial. And so it was a really good opportunity for our members to go through an orientation on that. And the picture on the left is some of the firefighter self-rescue drills that we were able to do in the school using our smoke machine and some training props, such as culverts and some lake construction that we did just to simulate self-rescue firefighters, which is so important. And it's we don't often get a real lifelike building like this to actually where we can actually literally tear down doors and cut through walls and things like that. Of course, we weren't able to attend out-of-town training sessions for a couple of years there, so that was a big, literally the floodgates opened for us and a lot of other departments to get out of town and get specifically Comox Fire Training Center. We spent a lot of time sending our members up there because it's world-class training and it's all accredited training as well, which is necessary. And there's a couple of happy faces on Live Fire Day up there. It's when they do live fire training, it's a real tough day. Like they're tired at the end of the day. It's actually a weekend, but when they come back, they're just so enthused and just want more. So it's great, and that's at the end of it after getting their butts kicked for a couple hard days, and they're smiling. This is another course recently held in Qualcomm Beach Fire Hall. Again, another skill that we just don't get the opportunity to be as proficient in as I would like, and specifically in hose handling and nozzle activation. So it was a great course put on by a member of Seattle Fire Department. And the one on the right is a picture of the Comox Live Fire Training Center. And 3 of our members are outside of it. And there's firefighter Clayton going in with a group. And another good thing about the Comox Fire Training Center is that firefighters, you'll be in a mixed class with firefighters from all over. Usually it's Vancouver Island, but sometimes they come from farther. So all of a sudden now you're thrown into a team of like-minded people with like-minded skills, but maybe differing opinions and personalities. And all of a sudden you need to become a team like right now because you're going into a fire. So it's a great learning opportunity. And then some of the ongoing training that's going on throughout the year. So driver training is constant. Pretty much every Tuesday night we'll have one of our senior officers going out with another member and just getting experience operating our vehicles. And then ongoing NFPA 1001 written and practical evaluations. Hazardous materials operations certification. We recently hosted a course in Tofino, but it was jointly hosted by myself and Tofino Fire. So it was really nice to be able to host a course like that down here on the West Coast, rather than having to send our members to Nanaimo or Vancouver to do that. And it just cuts our costs by thousands. So. And of course, the ongoing live fire 1 and 2 training, Comox Fire Training Center. Recently did elevator rescue, where we talked about fire officer development, which is great. We've got them inside the door, and I got a bunch of my fire officers. I think sort of hooked on the program, and it's great because they come back to me now. They learn all this stuff in the courses, and hey, chief, do we have an operational guideline for this, or what's our policy for that, or are we doing this? So it's also a good way to keep me sharp and make sure we're doing all the things we need to be doing. And of course, we do survival training and rescue techniques, and that's a lot of the drills from that course we were able to replicate by utilizing the old high school before it was demolished. This is a picture of our recent elevator training course. So that's actually the fellow that's leaned over. That's on the top of the elevator at the Black Rock. So it was a great opportunity for us to literally get inside, and we were standing on top of the elevator and looking at all the mechanisms, and learned a lot about the Black Rock specifically. But then, they have two different types of elevators, which we wouldn't have known had we had the opportunity like this to actually go in there. So again, a great partner of the fire department. The Black Rock is a big supporter of ours, and we're lucky to be able to do these types of training courses here. There's a bunch of our members getting oriented on our lifting bags. So we have high pressure lifting bags. Essentially, they're real heavy duty airbags, and we can lift vehicles. We can lift a lot of weight with them, and they're just pressurized by air. But there's a lot to know about them because a lot can go wrong. So one of the tools that we don't use a lot, but when we do, we need it now. We need to be sharp on our skills. So we'll pull them out every now and then and just do a quick orientation on those. And the picture on the right is that's Captain Reed doing the survival training and rescue techniques course in Comox, and as you can see, we're practicing self-rescue out a second-story window. So that's always a fun day in training. And then, of course, the physical part of the training, it's important as firefighters that, especially at night when you're sleeping, you need to, and the pager goes off, you need to be alert and awake. And a lot of times that can wreak havoc on your heart and your blood pressure and things like that, going from 0 to 100. So it is important that we maintain a good level of fitness and promote healthy living. So we have a nice little gym in the basement of the fire hall there. And from time to time, we'll bring in trainers on a training night, and they'll actually put us through the paces. Just another prop, a confined space prop, a culvert, and you can see the firefighter going through with the air pack and how much clearance there is. And that's one of our smaller firefighters. So you can see it's there's a lot of pushing our members outside of their comfort zones, pushing the limits, but that's part of it. So. Fire prevention, which is a big part of what I do as a chief and the fire inspector. So in the first 3 months of the year, I completed 48 fire safety inspections. Focus of the inspection program has been on business license applications. So work closely with our planning department and bylaw to ensure that any new business license application comes across my desk to figure out if they actually need a fire safety inspection. And if it's a new business and they utilize any space of any sort, then typically the answer is yes. So. But most of the majority of the fire inspections that I do are on short-term rentals. And then we'll be able to really have that program flourish in 2023 with the addition of support for myself, because that'll be under their portfolio will be fire prevention and training. So looking forward to that. Just building on that program. So right now membership's at 17. I'd like to have it a little bit higher. I'd like to, we have three quality applicants that we'll be doing interviews with in early January. So that'll bring us up to around 20. And in a perfect world, I'd like to have a couple dozen. But whenever people ask, well, what do they need to know or what do they need to be trained in to be a firefighter? And the biggest thing I say is they have to be the right fit for our team, because we can always train them as long as they have the will and the desire and the commitment. But you got to be the right fit, and you got to have support of your family. Otherwise, it just won't happen. So our officers team is led by myself, the fire chief, and deputy chief, as well as our lieutenants. You may recognize that ruggedly handsome young man as my deputy chief, Fortune. I'm lucky to have a guy like him beside me. 2022 recruit class completed their probation a while ago. So when firefighters join, they have a 6-month probationary period where they're not allowed to respond to calls. They have to maintain 100% attendance. If they do miss a training or a evaluation night, they have to come up with a plan to make it up. And they have specific educational goals that they need to achieve, or their probation is extended beyond the 6 months. So that's a milestone for these recruits. They all were able to get their pagers on time. In fact, they met the educational requirements well ahead of time. They were really chomping the bit to get their pagers because they'd done the training, the required training in about 3 months. So I'm lucky that they're just a phenomenal group. And early in the new year, this group will be certified to the exterior firefighter level, which is about the halfway point of the certification and accreditation process. So they're certified as exterior, and then they become interior, and then a few other skill sets will they're called full service firefighters. And there's a picture of the group. So typically, most departments are fortunate if they can retain half of their new recruits long term. So far we're doing pretty good with this bunch. 4 of the 5 are still with us. One weeded themselves out fairly early, and that was through natural selection. That it just weren't aware of the time commitments involved. So I always say it's better to understand that early on than when it's too late. So. And I always invite them back if once they do apply and go through the process, and if it's just not, the timing's not right, I typically will invite them to reach out to me when the timing is right for them. Very fortunate to have such a great group of firefighters representing the department and the municipality. So just some snapshots of some of our members here. We've got a wide range of skills and certifications from our members. We've got Adam here, for instance, is a tow truck driver, so he's got a lot of mechanical knowledge when it comes to road rescue. This guy here is a marine mechanic as well as a motorbike mechanic. So anything mechanically related, our small engines, one of my go-to guys. This fellow works in the tourist industry, so very, very good with handling people and working with our new recruits. So we've got a really good cross section. I've got several trades people on staff as well. I've got a millwright, several contractors, which are just as a fire chief, I'm very lucky to have the wide range of skill sets underneath me. And being a firefighter is not just about training and preparing for the big one. It is about serving the community in general. So we do attend a lot of public events, which is another area that I'm really trying to promote our membership and our Firefighters Association. Of course, we haven't been able to do too much the last couple of years because of COVID. But now things are pretty much back to normal. So here you can see Lieutenant McCurry and Reed giving a station tour to a grade 1 class from the elementary school. So it's always nice when we can have the kids come over. This was the Yuki Days Parade. That was our open house in October. And of course the Edge to Edge, where we I had a couple of members here helping out at the start. And that as well as the open house, where we had the team did a really good job, a real good live demo of rescuing people, several different scenarios out of a car. And there was not much left of that car once they got through with it. But so it worked really well in two ways, in that the public got an opportunity to see the kind of skills and knowledge that they have, but it also was a good training opportunity for the members to actually take a car right down to, really literally to the nuts and bolts. There's my recruits, and this was at the elementary school PAC barbecue in September. So, these are our newest members, and right away they were the first to put up their hand and say, yeah, I'll help with the barbecue. So that's the type of people that we're attracting, and that's the type of people we really hope to attract. So. And the open house, the kids just love our machinery and stuff. So that's our Rescue 3 full of kids. And then the Porsche Club weekend in May, and I kind of joke that you can tell it's May and Ucluelet because the firefighters are all bundled up and it's raining and not the nicest weather yet. So. And of course, some of the initiatives that we have ongoing is our reflective address sign program. So, we're constantly pushing the signs, and it's not a fundraiser. We sell them basically just to recover our costs and pay for the taxes. And we even offer to install them if people require a hand with that. So. And to date, we've got about 70 of those around the town, and they're popping up everywhere, and they're great. And even this example, some of the businesses now are also getting on board. So. And that's about all I have. And this council has any questions, comments, concerns?
Any questions from council to staff? No, that was a pretty fulsome report. Thank you, Chief.
My pleasure.
Would council like to bring any other information items forward for discussion? Okay, we have 12.4 District of Ucluelet 2022 Audit Service Plan. So this is just basically a plan of how the auditors are going to audit us. That's kind of it in a nutshell, right? All right. Mayor's announcements. We're all missing the sale past right now. With any luck, we might catch the tail end of it. There is a holiday lunch on this Thursday, December 15th from 12 to 1:30 here at the Community Center in the main hall. It's hosted by West Coast Community Resources Society and sponsored by the Ucluelet Co-op, the District of Ucluelet, as well as the CBT, I think I saw in another ad somewhere. And it's really nice to have this back again because it was always something to look forward to, and then COVID hit and we couldn't do that anymore. So looking forward to being there. Council committee reports. Councillor Anderson.
I have nothing to report at this time.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hoare.
Well, we did all attend the budget meeting on the first budget meeting, December 8th. So now we've started that process. Hooray. Look for more, everybody. I'm really sorry we're missing the sale pass, just saying. I attended the Glee show on the weekend. I want to say that the kids in our community are pretty flipping awesome. And you'd be amazed at some of the voices that come out of these kids that you're just used to seeing running around or trying to get chicken fingers at lunch, if you're me. I would like to thank everybody who helped out with the reverse Advent. That was 3 weeks of giving, and pretty much every day I would pop my nose in and take a look in the donation bin, and there'd be some extra items. And so I just want to say thank you to everybody for that, because I appreciate it, and the food bank appreciates it, and they're doing their hampers next week. I'm saving boxes. But I do hear that there's still some angels on the Christmas tree down at Remax. So that, for those of you who do not know, you pick up an angel. The angel has a child, male or female, age range, and you get an appropriate gift and wrap it, and it goes back under the tree with the angel attached to it, and then it gets distributed when the hampers are distributed as well. And I believe we have a few more days still on that one. So go visit Remax and pick up an angel, because there's kids out there and they all deserve to have lots of treats.
Thank you. Any questions for Councillor Hoare? Councillor Kennington.
Nothing to report at this time.
Councillor Mafty.
Nothing to report at this time.
Well, I am jealous because I have a very long list here. November 30th, I attended the ACRD orientation on finance. That was through Zoom. December 1st, I attended the ACRD orientation on planning in the morning and legal in the afternoon, also by Zoom. December 3rd, I attended the fire department banquet at the UCC here. That was great. December 5th, I had a meeting with Cheryl McClay from the Ministry of Jobs, Economic Recovery and Innovation, and we talked about transportation at great length. December 6th, the district orientation on operations and parks and rec. December 7th, the ACRD West Coast Committee meeting, which I attended by Zoom. December 8th was our orientation at the fire hall in the morning, and then our first budget meeting in the afternoon. December 9th, we all attended the newly elected all-day workshop with Don Schaefer, which was a great day. And then we were all at the district Christmas party that evening. And that is it for my meetings, and I'm off to the ACRD for a meeting tomorrow. Any questions for me?
Did you get any traction on the transportation discussion?
Yes, but more so at the ACRD West Coast Committee meeting. They are putting some funds toward looking at an alternate process, an alternate system as opposed to relying on BC Transit, because it doesn't look like BC Transit is going to come through for us anytime soon. And they have, like I said, they have put some money toward it. So what Cheryl McClay was suggesting was that there were some grants available to do this, but if the ACRD is already putting money toward it, then that's great. We can just see how that unfolds. Any other questions for me? Okay, question period. This is an opportunity for the public to ask questions about items that have been addressed on today's agenda. Questions and comments about bylaws 1319 and 1320 will not be heard because the public hearings have closed. Are there any questions from the audience? That would be a no. Claudia? Oh, good. So no questions from you? Okay. Are there any questions by Zoom or telephone, Mr. Rotenberg?
Click the raise your hand icon if you have a question. No hands are raised.
And have we received any emails to communityinput@ucluelet.ca?
Not at this time.
All right, then this meeting is adjourned at 7:44. Thank you for attending.